Yo, Shortbox Nation, hello again. Welcome back, and thanks for pressing play today. If you're brand new, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Botter Milligan, and this is the Shortbox Podcast, the comic book talk show that brings you the best conversations about your favorite comics with the people that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making them. This is episode 486, and today we have Doug Wagner on the podcast. He's a comic book writer and has been described as a storyteller of the delightfully deranged. Now, as someone who has spent the last week diving into his work, I've never heard a more accurate quote and description. Doug is best known for his dark comedy and horror comics following serial killers and cannibalistic furries like the Image Comics series I Was a Fashion School Killer, Plush, and Vinyl. Some of his other work includes Batman Arkham Origins, World of Warcraft, and Marvel Zombies. He's got a brand new Image comic series coming out in March. It's called Narcos. It's the next edition in the Materials universe that he's been amassing. This new book, Narcos, takes place in the same universe where Plastic, Plush, and Vinyl take place. Doug has pitched Narcos as his version of an Alfred Hitchcock movie, drawing inspiration from Rear Window and Psycho, respectively. Issue 1 of Narcos comes out March. Oh no. Issue 1 of I'm gonna have to re-record this part. All right, issue 1 of Narcos comes out. I'm doing this live here. Okay. It comes out March 21st, with the FOC being February 9th, which would be the following Wednesday that you're hearing this. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say this in the front. If you like what you hear, go to your local comic shop and put Narcos on your pull list. Now, we'll talk to Doug about Narcos. We'll talk to him about the working with Image Comics and what it takes to create a shared universe. But first, I want to thank our two amazing sponsors. The first one being Gotham City Limit Comic Shop. It's my local comic shop, but it's also Jacksonville's premier shop for comics, toys, collectibles, and more. And last but not least, I want to give a big shout out to Collective Con, Northeast Florida's premier anime, comic book, and pop culture event. They're back again this year for their 11th convention. It's taking place here in Jacksonville, Florida on March 29th through the 27th. March 27th through the 29th. You can get your tickets at collectivecon.com. There we go. Now, without further ado, Shortbox Nation, let's give it up for Doug Wagner. Hey, Doug. Welcome to the show.
How's it going today?
Not too shabby, Doug. How I usually try to just dive right into it, but I don't mind staying a little bit on some small talk because we are both recording. We're recording this on Tuesday, January 27th. We are kind of smack dab in the middle of an insane winter storm all over the U.S. Now, granted, I'm here in Jacksonville, Florida, so cold for us is when it dips below 40. This morning, it was like 20 degrees, and I was bundled up. You are from, I believe, I've read that you are in Park City, Utah. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
I looked up the temperature today. You guys had a high of 39 and a low of 8. I was looking for the other digit. I was like, where's the other digit? And it's like, no, that's it. Are you keeping warm? How are you doing today?
Oh yeah, I mean it's been such crazy weather this year. And I moved to Park City because I love skiing and I live in the mountains, and
nice.
So 39 is actually pretty warm, kind of a regular sunny day for us. That's no big deal, but I mean it's been so weird because we haven't gotten any snow this year. It's been going right over the top of us and then hitting the rest of the nation. So we're actually kind of envious that everybody else is getting all this snow and we've got none. So it's like it's weird, like moved here for snow. And I didn't know you were in Jacksonville. Was born in Fort Pierce, Florida.
Oh, no way. Another fellow Florida man.
Yep, nice. Yep. So until I was 15, I lived in Florida. So.
Wow. Okay. Well, look, we got something else in common. We both love comic books and we're both Florida men. I love that. Doug, before we hit record, I told you, I even mentioned in the intro that I have been, deep diving your work. Big shout out to Sean Edgar, who connected us. He also gave me a really awesome drop box full of, awesome comics written by you. But one thing that, which gave me a good place to start, I ended up reading the first issue of Narcos. I got an advanced review. That was awesome. I was reminded, I've read Vinyl. I remember buying the first issue when it came out, I think last year, by you and Daniel Hilliard. I don't know if another interesting fact about me, I'm a big record collector. So a comic book titled Vinyl, I was like, well, I got to buy this off principle. And what else did I've been reading? I read the first issue of I Was a Fashion School, high school. Wait, I was a fashion. Damn it, I got it mixed up. Come on, help me out
No,
here.
you're good. You're good. I was a fashion school serial killer.
I was a fashion school serial killer. And then I started reading. I went a little back. I was like, all right, let me go like further back in your bibliography. And I want to thank you for introducing me to maybe like one of my new favorite comics. I ended up reading The Ride for
Oh
the
yeah.
first time and was blown away by it. It's like, and it comes at an interesting time because I don't know if you know, but there's an article or an interview of Jim Lee that's been circulating this week where he's talking about like the power of manga and why he thinks it's so popular and what American comics could learn from it. And one of the things that he talks about, one of the advantages that he talks about when it comes to manga is that it's not um it's not focused on one genre. And that's not to say American comics is. I mean, you look at, any of your titles or image, the mini titles on Image. But I think when a lot of people think of like the big comic publishers or think of comic books, they think superheroes like Marvel and DC, the two biggest publishers. But he's talking about that like manga has such a variety when it comes to genre. And to tie it back to The Ride, I found it interesting that it's published on 12 gauge like press or comics, and that you guys specifically wanted to started the company because you felt like I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like there was a focus on crime and action comics was missing, right?
Yep, that is true. Yep. I mean, it's kind of fun. I mean, Kevin Gardner, who's the president of 12 Gauge, and I've told the story a couple of times, but it's always fun to rehash it. It's like we were the typical, like at one point we both ran a comic shop, and
Oh
that's how we
wow,
became friends. Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
And we did what everybody does in comics. We talk about like, well, if I ran Marvel, if I ran DC,
Hmm.
this is what I'd do. And we did that for several years as friends. And I think I was sitting at his house one night, and we were sitting on the couch, doing the same thing. Well, if I was in charge of Marvel, this is what I'd do. And I can't remember which one of us said it, but one of us looked at each other and went, "It's time for us to put up or shut up."
Hmm.
And so that's where 12 Gauge Comics was created. We decided we were going to do that, and then it became like, well, what kind of comic we want to do? We knew we didn't want to try to compete with Marvel and DC doing superheroes.
Yeah.
So we went, what's missing? And Kevin was like, I really want to do like Southern crime. And I was like, oh my God, that's a fantastic idea. And then we started pitching it to a couple of friends like Brian Stelfreeze and Cully Hamner.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were all in, and so like that's where it kind of got started. We just really wanted to try to do something that was different and, easier to follow with like maybe more of an anthology and short
Yeah.
stories
Yeah.
that you could follow. And yeah, dude, I mean, that's where it all began. I mean, that was my first comic that I'd written probably in like a decade.
Interesting. Okay, and I guess for I definitely feel like I hit the ground running with this. Sometimes I get so excited. Just to take a step back for anyone that might be a little curious, The Ride is an anthology series centered around a 1968 Camaro and the many characters whose lives it alters. I mean, and with it being a crime-focused comic book, we're talking about police, cops, and robbers. Gangsters, all of that stuff. And like Doug was saying, it's an anthology series. And I guess I found like a trade or a collected volume where it had a good bit of comics. And I mean, the names in it. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
you're there, Brian Stelfreeze. I have a whole new appreciation for Cully Hamner.
Mhm.
That is just, I mean, seeing. And I guess one thing I should note is that The Ride is a black and white anthology, which I think is a very interesting creative choice, but it brings the artwork to life in a way that reminds me of how much I love like Batman black and white. So I know we're not here to talk about The Ride, but I just wanted to say, man, I ended up I read so much of that trade last night that like my eyeballs just went out on me. I just fell asleep reading, my iPad in my face.
Yeah, I mean, you're not. I mean, what was great is, I mean, I grew up. Cully Hamner and I actually went to high school together,
Oh, that's cool.
and so that's where we became friends. And then after we graduated high school, like he moved over to Atlanta and became part of Gaijin Studios, which
Hmm.
had like Adam Hughes and
Hmm.
Dave Johnson and Tony Harris and Jason Pierce. Like the list goes on and on. And so luckily I was friends with those guys. And so when Kevin and I started talking about, hey, what do we want to do first? It's like, hey, let's talk to the gang. And luckily I was friends with those guys, and they were again, I keep saying luckily, but it was all luck. It was like
Yeah, yeah,
they all were in and wanted to do something different. And that's where
yeah.
the whole like, hey, Brian's like, I can't commit to 4 issues, but I could do 11 pages.
Hmm.
And Cully was like, I can do that too. And that's where it kind of started layer in like, hey, wait a minute, we could have amazing artists every 11 pages.
Yeah.
And that was the whole goal.
Yeah, there's a great. I mean, I loved your story with Cully Hamner. I think I'm currently on like the one where you and Brian Stelfreeze continue the story, but there is a remarkable Ron Mars and Chris
Mhm.
Brumner story
Oh yeah.
that at first it stands out so much because the first I mean, like you said, it's like 11, 12 pages, so they're like really quick stories to read, but the first 9 pages are in, like, I'm assuming Chinese or something. And
Yep.
I'm like, this is a radical difference. And then by the end, the way it wraps up, and then he adds the script that's translated, it's like, this is what I'm talking about. Like thinking outside of the box, making a bold, creative choice of black and white. Yeah, man, I love the ride. Like I gotta say, you got a new fan. I know it's like from 2004, but I think that's the beauty of art is that to me the time, it doesn't have an expiration date. Like great stories, great art last. They speak volumes even throughout time.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was just talking to a friend and I recommended he'd never heard of Cosmic Odyssey before, and it's still one of my favorite
Oh,
DC books.
yeah.
And I just reread it the other day, like it's sitting on my stand. I was like, oh man, I want to go back and reread that. Mike Mignola and Jim Starlin,
Yeah.
and like it was just a great story from cover to cover.
It
And
dawned
so
on
yeah,
me. Yeah, it dawned on me at Heroes Con. I ended up picking up a couple. I ended up funny story about Cosmic Odyssey last year at Heroes Con. I want to say the letterer. I want to say his name is like John Letterman. I could be absolutely wrong. I'll have to correct this later. But the editor, not the editor, he's a letterer. I'm sorry, he's a letterer. The letterer of Cosmic Odyssey was set up at Heroes Con, and um, it was him and his wife. They're a little an older couple, and they had all of their comics like bagged in like grocery bags. They just had like literally like just a little cardboard box selling their comics, which was like different from all of the other like create and no shade, like the other creators had like apparently they obviously like really travel a lot. I think they were just set up for the day, like let's see if we can move some of these old books. So his wife was like really trying to move them, and I want to say his name was John. He was like just he had stories for days. So she was like, John, you got like the lines forming. But I ended up buying like these single issues, issues one. I think I'm missing three, so I have one, two, and four. And he signed them all, and he had nothing but great things to say about Mike Mignola and that story. And it made me realize as much as I love that series, I don't have it collected. Like that's one of those comics you collect in one of those like nice oversized deluxe hardcovers.
yeah, and that's what I have. That's why I reread because it's like the hardcover,
Yeah,
oversized.
yeah.
You
Now,
know.
Doug, you mentioned you ran a comic shop, and I did not have that in my research. How long were you running? Sorry, how long did you own a comic shop?
I didn't own one. I ran one. So I got,
Oh, okay.
I was the manager. And then at one point we had 4 stores. So I was kind of like, I guess, technically a district manager.
Where at?
Oh, that was in Birmingham, Alabama.
Huh.
Yep.
Okay. What was
And
the name of
so,
the
yeah,
shop?
it was called the Comic Strip.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, I ran those for probably 2, maybe 3 full years.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I love, I originally started in Walden Books back when it was in the mall, and I was a manager at Walden Books.
Hmm.
Moved to Birmingham, and then I was like, oh, I need a new job. So I got this comic strip job. Love that. And, it was just, I loved being around books and
Yeah,
comics.
yeah, yeah.
And so, like for me, that was like a no brainer as I'm trying to learn how to write comics. I still wanted to be surrounded by them.
I guess at your peak, it's at your peak working in the shop at the peak. Like, how many comics would you say were you reading on like a weekly basis?
Oh God. When I was working there, dude, I tried to read as many as I possibly could get my
Hmm.
hands on. It was like one of those things like, hey, if customers come in and want a recommendation, I have to be
Sure.
ready. So I would say on a regular week, I was probably reading 30, 40 comics a week. I mean, it was free for me, so I just picked them off the stand and, read them real quick. So, that made it a lot easier. But yeah, I mean, dude, it was at least when they came in, like, half of my day that first, and that's back when they all came out on Thursday.
Hmm.
Um, I spent the whole day just reading comics.
Is there anything from your time, running a comic shop that you still like that experience and that moment in time for you that you still tap into when like you're creating comics now or writing? Like, is there anything that you took from that experience running a shop, to this day?
Oh yeah, I think one of the biggest one is covers.
Hmm.
Trying to figure out how to stand out in a crowd of 50
Mm.
to 100 books. And I think unfortunately we've kind of, even in American comics, we've kind of gotten like we all our comic covers tend to look alike.
Interesting. Okay.
And so like they can blend in too much.
Sure.
So it's trying to figure out how to like make it different. And even if you look at the ride with Adam Hughes, one of our big questions for him was like, hey, how can we make this stand out? And he was like, we're not going to do a lot of backgrounds. We
Hmm.
need to do like a solid color. It needs to be white. And it worked, it just stood out. And so
Yeah.
like that was a big one. Is like, how can you stand out amongst the 400 comics that come out that month? And not only from the cover part, but like you kind of have a good log line to sell it to the retailer because
Yeah.
again, they've now I think it's like 500 to 1,000 comics come out every week. I mean, every month, and they've got to pick and choose what they're going to spend their money on.
Yeah.
And if you've got a really bad sounding, like description of your book and it's kind of boring, they're going to like, well, I don't know how to sell that.
Yeah.
So you have to like hit, those kind of notes to
Yeah.
work in a comic shop.
And I'm looking at if you're watching the video version, viewers, you'll know that Doug is got his library behind him, and he strategically has a copy of all of his books placed within eyesight, and I think it looks great. But thinking about a cover that garners attention. I gotta say, you got Jay Lee, who did the cover for I Was a Fashion School Killer. You got Andrew Robinson. I mean, the guy's great, who did all the covers for Plastic. And I'll admit, I was unfamiliar. I feel like that shacked me, but I apologize. I was unfamiliar with your game. But Daniel Hilliard is remarkable.
Yeah.
And I think it's a damn shame. I'm just learning about him. Maybe he's been taught, he's getting the praise he deserves elsewhere. But I want to say, if you're not familiar with Daniel Hilliard, who has been your artist, your co-creator on several of the Materials Universe titles, that guy is great. I didn't know but he's not here in the States, right? He's in Spain.
Yep, he's an Englishman that lives in Spain.
That's great. How did
He's
you two
made
meet?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like, he sent in, a portfolio, like, actual pages, right? So he
Okay.
sent a portfolio to the 12 Gauge website.
Oh, wow.
And at this point,
Huh.
I'm living in Atlanta, and I'm in the studio with the guys at Gaijin. And so he sends the portfolio to Brian Stelfreeze and goes, "Hey, is this guy any good?" Because, sometimes, you have your favorites and you're like, "Oh, this isn't what I thought it was." And then Brian immediately brought it over. He printed it out and brought it over to me, and he said, "Hey, you need to work with this guy." I was like, "Oh, okay, guy looks pretty decent. I'll get in contact with him." So we're emailing back and forth, and we start working together. And it was just one of those things to where, like, sometimes you meet people, and you're
Oh,
like, you
that's
just work
great.
really well together. And
Yeah.
we have the same kind of quirky sense of humor, for horror books and that kind of thing. And we started just working together, and dude, we've been working together ever since. We have a system,
Hmm.
we're we get along great.
Yes.
So it's just one of those things that, like, I just got blind luck,
Yeah,
which
yeah. It seems to be the theme. Just luck and being with the right people. It sounds like more
Mhm.
so like people that are also motivated, that are creative, that are willing to take risks to do cool things. Daniel Hilliard's, and I mean, obviously, this is a audio first podcast, so I want to try to describe his style in a little more detail, but and not to compare, but just to kind of set some framework. Some of his composition and framework, and like for Narco, for example, the new comic that we'll be talking about here soon, when he draws like the narcolepsy scenes taking over, I don't know why, but it gives me a very Trad more kind of feel to it, where it feels like very liquidy, but also very surreal. And then, but Daniel got a killer way of just drawing regular people in regular settings, but still keeping it interesting. And that reminds me of like Ryan Otley when he did like Invincible, and just that crazy task of just always drawing like the most kind of like normal, mundane life, but keeping it interesting. I think Daniel Hilliard is like a great combo of both. He's got like
Yeah,
such solid pencil.
and you can definitely tell, like, he was a fan of Brian Stelfreeze. He's a fan of Cully Hamner. Ryan Otley and Tradmore are definitely on that list. You can kind of see,
Cool.
like, the influences
Yeah.
that those 4 guys have on him. It's always fun to see it.
I guess while we're on the topic of Daniel Hilliard and Narco, let's spend some time here. Even though I've got some other questions I want to get to, but how about we talk about Narcos? And on the topic of log lines, I want to read you the solicitation for issue 1. I think this is issue 1, and I want you to tell me what else would you add to it, or what can people expect from the rest of the series, because it is supposed to be a 5-issue series. Issue 1, like I said, comes out on March 4th. So I'm going to read the solicitation. Tell me what else you would add to it. All right. The solicitation for issue 1 of Narcos reads: Marcus Westphal has a rare form of narcolepsy. When he gets excited, he passes out. He's adapted, though. Homebound life, a harmless infatuation with the girl next door. But when he witnesses her murder and collapses, he becomes suspect number 1. Now he must leave his apartment to pursue a killer. Talk about an interesting and attention-grabbing premise.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, and that's usually as far as I tend to go because I always hate being the person that spoils things. I can tell you, like it's exactly
Yeah.
like that's how the whole series goes. Like you got Marcus who's dealing with this form of narcolepsy, who in our timeline, in our current time, like it's easy to adapt to, right? Like you can do DoorDash to get your food or your groceries.
Ah,
And so
yeah.
like he learns to like I can be kind of insulated
Mhm.
and I have to interact with the real world. And so he learns how to deal with this. And then, of course, we're going to tear him out of that very abruptly. And he's got like really good friends. Like he's got
Yeah.
a good group of misfit friends that we don't really, you can't throw in the log line kind of stuff. But he's got a good group of friends that like help him out and understand what he's going through and love him for exactly who he is.
Yeah.
And then we throw them in the middle of this crazy murder mystery. And, we're like, imagine a guy that's got this form of narcolepsy being interrogated. It's like,
Yeah, that's great.
and then I got too excited and I passed out. So there's that kind of stuff. And, then we lead into like, well, who's the murderer? And is the murderer was the person they murdered the target, or was Marcus the target?
Mhm.
Those kind of things. So we just had a lot of fun with like diving into what
Yeah.
you mentioned it a little earlier. Like I love Hitchcock, and we want to kind of do our version of Hitchcock in a modern day setting.
Yeah, when I read the press release and the mention of Rear Window was in the press release, I got excited because that was a film I had to watch in like a intro to film class in like freshman year of college, and it was one that like really stuck with me because of just how tense it was, how helpless you felt for the main character as also yourself. You're like, what does a guy have a broken leg gonna do for something happening across the street? So I saw some of those parallels here, and it was cool to see that you and Daniel both have that shared love of Alfred Hitchcock, and that was a big inspiration for this series. I guess what would you say? What can a writer in today's day and age, specifically like a comic writer or writer working in comics, what can they learn from a master like Alfred Hitchcock? Like, what lessons or things have you learned from Hitchcock that you personally use in your scripts or plotting and such?
Okay, I mean, I think you nailed some of the things from Rear Window is one of my favorite films.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go and watch that, it takes place in one environment, right? You're basically just in his apartment, and how he uses small scenes to like lead you down a path that you assume is right, but then you find out later you were completely wrong.
Hmm.
And being able to like take that kind of stuff and mislead your reader, not like intentionally with dialogue or anything, but just like with small scenes or snippets of things, and how you can make something so intense in just one setting, just an apartment for an entire film, to me was amazing. Like I'd never seen anything like that before until I bumped into that film. And I'm not sure you see a lot of that even in Hollywood now.
Yeah.
Like, there's these big bombastic sets and those kind of things. I think what you can learn is like, it's not necessarily about you have to do end game. You can do something like Rear Window and people are still enthralled. It doesn't have to be like nothing but, blowing stuff up and Fast and Furious style movie storytelling. I mean, hey, there's
Yeah.
always a place for that, and I love
Sure.
that stuff myself. But in comics, you can't necessarily pull off, some of that stuff as well as they can in film. And so
Sure.
you got to kind of
Absolutely.
learn like how cinema works and how cinematic shots can determine how a book reads.
Hmm. I don't, this is so random, but when I think about Rear Window, I think about one of my favorite episodes of The Simpsons where they did like kind of a montage of it. I think it's actually called Bart of Darkness. Big shout out to Warren Evans. So I can't help but think about like that episode and how such, amazing that time period in Simpsons. It was like nonstop greatness. But that said, I couldn't help but notice, from like plastic and plush and vinyl, like obviously the themes, it's you and Daniel have put out so many comic books based on horror and serial killers and crime and action. Yeah, I guess is that a conscious thing? Like, do you just do you just stick with like what you like and or and especially thinking about like your relationship with 12 gauge comics and that being focused specifically on crime and action. I have like this. I'm seeing like this, like you tend to lean in on like the genre comics, and I guess why so?
I mean, I think for us, I mean, the first thing I had was plastic.
Hmm.
So, I had Daniel and I wanted to work on something together and we couldn't figure out what. So I kind of pitched him 3 or 4 ideas and he picked plastic. And I was like, man, are you sure? Because this one's like serial killers and kind of weird, and it's got a blow up doll in it. Like he's and he's like, I love it. I love it. And so that kind of got us down that road, and we found like we just have this love for dark comedy horror.
Mm-hmm.
And we just got, I mean, I wouldn't say we wouldn't do anything else, but we just kind of got sucked into like, man, we really love this. And since Plastic did so well, I mean, if people keep letting us do this, we want to keep doing books like this for a while because we just love doing it.
Give the people what they want.
Exactly.
More sex dolls, right? And blood.
And so we just kind of fell in that gap of like, hey, we love doing this. And if people are going to continue to support it, we'll keep doing it because like I said, it's just one of those things we love so much. And I think we'll break out, see us maybe do some supernatural stuff and that kind of stuff in the future because we'll probably stay in the supernatural horror space.
Now, I think what's interesting is that I had no idea that all of this was connected. Like this is, plastic, vinyl, plush. Now Narcos is all part of this materials universe. And like I'm like, damn, this is interesting because I don't know how many other horror specific comic universes there are. So I think what you're building is very interesting. All of the books, it makes a lot of sense. They feel different, but there seems to be like this through line. And I want to know, with Narcos being the latest addition to the materials universe, I guess like what defines what gets included in said materials universe, and what is the connective tissue between the different titles? Like, are we going to see like these characters overlap or interact with each other?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it started out with basically we did Plastic, and Eric Stevenson from Image came and said, "Hey, we think you should do a trilogy, all based on materials." And we're like, "Hey, yeah, we'll jump into that." And then the decision became, "Hey, do we want them to be connected in the same universe, kind of thing?" And we agreed we wanted that. And then it was just like something that was very important for Daniel and I from the very beginning is we wanted all of our trades to be standalone. You don't have to read one to understand the other, but hopefully we'll put enough Easter eggs in each one of them to where like, oh, wait a minute, these are all connected. And I think if you'll notice, like most of them are set in different cities. And I wanted, since I've been able to travel a lot in the United States, I wanted that like, hey, wait a minute, we can do a serial killer, cannibalistic, furry thing going on throughout the United States, but each state has kind of its own vibe.
Yeah.
And so it was just one of those things of like, hey, let's continue to like create stories in this universe, but like they don't all have to feel exactly the same. Like we can do one in Louisiana, we can do one in Kansas City, just kind of move things around so that they all feel a little different, but again, they're all connected. And what makes one fit in there, honestly, we just kind of start and go, hey, this is Narco is going to be in the universe, and we just run with it.
Man, I mean, Doug, I guess I don't have to tell you because you're a fellow Florida man. I imagine the creative potential for a horror comic book based out of Florida is limitless, and you're just waiting for the right time and the right opportunity. But I know Florida is chock full of some weird shit.
Oh yeah. I mean, Florida man is a thing. So it's like there's growing up there and seeing it all. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, and what's great about Florida is like there's even different vibes in different parts of Florida. North Florida doesn't feel anything like the Everglades.
No, not
Key
at all.
West is a completely different world altogether, so like there's so much fun you can have with all that stuff.
Yeah, I always joke that Jacksonville is like southern Georgia that's like a little looser, so yeah, I totally agree, which is not the same as like the vibe in Orlando or Tampa, or like you said, Key West is like a whole different country. It's like what is going on here? Okay, what else I got for you on here? Let me see what else I got. Okay. I want to go back to take a step back to some of like your earlier career. Like I said, you running a comic shop was news to me, but what I think I was able to find was maybe the first comic project that you were credited on. The earliest entry in your bibliography that I could find was a writing credit in Ultra Force number 4 from 1996. It features the Black Knight on the cover, written by Doug Wagner, art by Pino Rinaldi and Tom Wiggerson. And it's got a beautiful cover by John Stapma and the late great George Perez. What do you remember from that? And is that the first comic that you wrote?
Oh yeah, that was the first one. That was
wow.
I mean, that was an interesting that was Malibu Comics.
Yep.
Just as they were being bought by Marvel. And so Cully, Hamner, and I had actually created a series that Malibu was going to do. And so to keep me busy while Cully was finishing up Firearm at the time, they were going to give me a couple of issues of Ultra Force to do. And so we had all, everything planned out and all that kind of stuff, and did the first issue of Ultra Force. And then I was supposed to do 3 more before we jumped into our new series. And then the next day, Marvel called up and shut them down.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine, like, for me, because I finally felt like I'd broken in.
Yeah.
It was like, oh man, I finally got it. I got an editor that believes in me, and we're going to do some work together. And I get one issue out, and then it's over. And then it's like, so for me at that age, like I was devastated. Like it was like, wow, I've got to start from scratch. I got to see if, because it's not easy to get into comics. It's really difficult. And so, then I spent I was devastated for about a year, didn't do anything, then got back into writing. And then it was just, getting back into the grind of like being hard headed and getting as many rejection letters as you possibly could.
Yeah.
Until finally, Kevin and I started 12 Gauge, and that just kind of became its own beast.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it was this opportunity at Malibu of Ultra Force that fell through, and then 12 Gauge, and then it seems like from there, based on my research, it's been consistent work. I mean, you've been. I mean, your bibliography has grown since then. Okay, I didn't know that there was that wide of a gap between the Ultra Force and that. I guess how did you get your foot in the door with Malibu and Ultra Force? Like, how did you break into comics?
Well, luckily, I mean, at that point, Cully Hamner was doing Firearm. Okay. And he said, hey, Doug Wagner and I have this idea. We want to throw it at you. And we threw it at them, and they loved it. It was going to be like their new premiere title, that kind of stuff. And so
but I guess, like, what did you show them? I mean, like, it was just based off of Cully's, like, cosign was enough?
Oh, no. We had to come up with a pitch and everything. So Cully did sample pages, and we had a whole pitch. Back in those days, it wasn't quite as easy as putting it together on a computer. You had to do a lot of that stuff,
sure.
Over at Kinko's with different things. And so, yeah, I mean, we sent them a whole printed out, pitch. I mean, that back in the day, that's what I did. Like I mailed pitches, just like you hear Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane, like, and all the rejection letters they received. I mean, it was the same thing, dude. You type out a script and put a 1-page pitch on the front and send it to Marvel and DC and Malibu and Dark Horse and everybody else under the planet. And either await a phone call that they wanted to do it, or, your form rejection letter in the mail.
I learned an interesting trivia, at least to me, that Malibu was the first company to use digital coloring for all of its titles. And I think because they were like this computer coloring pioneer, it was a big reason why like DC wanted to buy them. But then Marvel was like, whoa. If DC buys them, then we might be in trouble. Let me go ahead. We'll buy them. And then, unfortunately, they don't really do much with them. And then I also ended up learning that, like, Malibu, I think because they were the publisher for the first handful of Image comics, it helped them get enough market share that they were like bigger than DC Comics at a time. Like, what do you remember from your time at Malibu?
I mean, everything at Malibu was great. The whole staff was great because they flew me out there to talk about cool. Getting the contracts and that kind of stuff signed. And it was a great little company. Like you said, they were the first ones doing digital coloring. And the worry when Malibu first sold to Marvel was that Marvel was going to do exactly what they ended up doing, which was basically we bought you for your coloring system. But Marvel promised them that wasn't the case, and they were going to continue to do stuff like having Black Knight in the universe and that kind of stuff. But I just remember, like, they were an up and comer, and they were really going to. I think at that point, like, they were third or fourth, as far as like comic book companies in sales, and they were making an impact. And it to this day, I think it's a shame that company didn't get a chance to like see what kind of damage they could have done. I mean, they were doing superheroes, so they were doing them a little bit differently. And
and I was looking at like just the that run that you wrote issue 4, but that was among I think that was like right in between, like Warren Ellis was writing. You had George Perez doing, like, I mean, he did interiors for the first Ultra Force series. I mean, there were some heavy hitters at the company.
Oh yeah, great books. I mean, they had great books. Firearm with Cully Hamner and James Robinson was a really good book. Basically like a noir detective stuck in a superhero world.
Yeah.
So like that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's a good point. Malibu is kind of a cool, like, what if, I wouldn't mind watching a document. I think they're like prime for a good documentary. It feels like a very Netflix documentary, especially like the Marvel buying them and promising one thing and the other. Yeah, that's great. I guess going back a little further, can you remember, I guess, what made you want to write comics? And do you remember like your first conscious exposure to comic books? Like, do you remember the one that made you like a fan?
Oh man, that's a little bit of a long, but like I started
Sure,
out
yeah.
as a kid, like if it wouldn't have been for comics, I wouldn't have been able to read.
Hmm.
So it was one of those things back when they had spinner racks in 7-Eleven, and my dad, took me to 7-Eleven every Saturday. And I started out with stuff like Casper and, Wendy the Witch and the Flintstones. And then kind of graduated to like, I started reading Avengers and Fantastic Four, and probably didn't bump into something that I was just like completely obsessed with until the Uncanny X-Men. And it was the John Byrne, Chris Claremont run.
Classic.
And, at that point, like then I just became obsessed with the Uncanny X-Men. And then I met Cully Hamner in high school. And, I was a senior, he was a freshman at the time. And he's over in the corner like doodling, and I realized he's doodling a superhero, and I think it was Batman.
Huh.
I said, "Oh my God, are you into comics?" And he's like, "Yeah." And so we immediately became friends. And just for fun, we started like creating our own characters and writing our own stories. And we did that for about 6 months before it like dawned on me, like, "Hey, wait a minute, I think this is what I want to do." And so I remember the morning I woke up. I was 17. I woke up and I went into my mom's bedroom and I was like, "Hey, I think I figured out what I want to do. I want to write comic books when I grow up." My mom wasn't too happy about it. She's like, "Well, good luck with that. You better have a plan B."
Yeah.
So like, yeah, that was the first, like at 17, I was like, man, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life.
Wow.
And it was very specific. Like I wanted to do comic books. It wasn't movies or TV or film or books.
I can't recall who said this quote, but that made me think of this quote I heard about like how much of a blessing it is to to figure out your calling, early in life, because then you can dedicate, all of your time and energy and youth to like doing that thing. And I could not imagine. I mean, I know at 17, I had no idea, I couldn't even fathom. So for you to have like this calling and pursue it so hard and work, run a comic shop, work in publishing, and then, end up co-creating your own comic line. I think that's awesome. And now here you are, going forward almost 5 deep of your own series of Image comics. I do want to ask, like, what is it like working with Image Comics throughout the years and, having them support your vision and work? Like, what do they offer you as a writer and as someone that owns his own like comic publishing?
Yeah, I mean they're fantastic. Like especially production department. Like I work with Erica Schnatz now, but everybody ever worked in production, like being able to call them up and go, "Hey, I don't know how to do this on a computer. Can you help me like figure out how to get these letters on
Yeah.
a page," or those kind of things. They're fantastic. I mean, Image is still the number 3
Yeah.
company in America, and so having the Image bullet on your comic gives it some sort of street credit.
Sure.
That's like the huge benefit. Eric Stevenson's always been super supportive, so he's great. Like I mean, I remember when we pitched Plastic to him, it was actually in a conference room at San Diego Comic-Con. And Daniel had already drawn 3 issues, so we just took them on an iPad, and he started thumbing through them, and I couldn't tell by his expression whether he liked it or hated it. And then he looks up and he's like, "Hey, it looks like you got 3 issues done. When can we publish this?" And
Yeah.
we're like, "Oh my god!" So that they have always been super helpful and super knowledgeable in telling you what you can and can't get away with, and in
Mhm.
comics. I can't recommend them enough. I mean, it's just again, I'm sure they're the only company where you outright own your IP 100%.
Mhm.
So there's like all these great benefits from a creator standpoint
Hmm.
that I've always enjoyed, and the fact that they get your books out, they get them out on time,
Yeah.
they handle all that stuff for you. I don't have to worry about talking to the printer. I don't have to worry about talking to the shipper. Those kind of things. And they have a really good, obviously relationship with the comic retailers too. So they help you on that side as well.
Yeah, so it sounds like they handle enough of the things, the rest of the comic making pipeline that allow you to focus just on being creative, just on the relationship with you, Daniel, your colors, your letters, etc. And they handle a big bulk of what comes after you hit, publish or finish.
Yeah, I mean, this way I'm not spending my day talking to a printer trying to figure things out.
Got it.
I
Got it.
spend
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
day talking to Eric or
Mhm.
Daniel or Erica about, hey, what's the coolest comic we can come up with?
Yeah.
So you're spending your energy on that versus trying to figure out, oh my gosh, I can't figure out how to do this for the printer.
Got it. And we talked about Alfred Hitchcock being kind of like the North Star for. It sounds like a lot of your writing, but especially for Narco. What other writers, and maybe specifically within the comic realm, like have also served as maybe like your North Star or like inspiration? I guess I'm asking like, who are some of your favorite writers that really influence your work or give you inspiration to
I mean,
do better?
dude, it's been, obviously it's grown over the years, but I mean, it started with Chris Claremont. Chris Claremont and his Uncanny X-Men run, still to this day, I think he is one of the greatest, you have to say, that's ever been done is over that period of time.
Yeah.
Denny O'Neil is another one that I absolutely love.
Yeah.
His stuff on The Question and some of the stuff. Yeah, he was just amazing. Right now, I mean, James Tynion, like, I don't know how he just seems to do great book after great book.
That's a really good answer coming from you. I like that. That is such a good answer coming from you. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, every time he comes up with a new book, I'm like, man, I wish I would have. And he actually influenced me on like calling I Was a Fashion School Serial Killer that long of a title, because I realized, oh man, like he's coming up with titles for his books that are almost like a mini log line.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice House on the Lake. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to question what it's about. You know what it's about just from the title.
Huh. Yeah. That's a damn good point.
Yeah. There's, and I'm going to miss a ton of them, but there's just so many great books and
Something is Killing the Children. Yeah. You're right. You're right. That's, I didn't even think about that. Like utilizing the title to also serve as like, here the pitch is in the title.
Yeah.
It's in the name.
I mean, I won't lie, like with the material stuff, like people walk up and they're like, what's plastic about? Because that doesn't tell you anything about what the book's about. So you kind of have to do the log line. But I Was a Fashion School Serial Killer, when I have that at a show, I don't have to say anything. Like,
it sells itself.
Know what it's about.
Yeah. I guess, all right, so do you count If I Was a Fashion School Serial Killer within the materials universe?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay. So that one gets an exception in terms of the title. I do think, though, even though plastic, and even writing my notes, I was like, well, how do I make this sound? I can plastic vinyl plush. If you say it, it's just like, why is he just naming these random things? It's like, no, I'm naming a comic series. I guess, but I do find if you dig even just a little deeper and you're like, oh, these are all part of a connected universe, and each one of these comics is centered around the thing in the title, plastic being the sex doll, vinyl literally being, the vinyl records that set the main character off. And then plush, which I recently read, and might I say, plush might be one of the most fucked up books I ever read. And I feel confident saying that because I've seen a quote from Robert Kirkman, I think, saying the almost same thing, I think, for plastic. This might be one of the most fucked up books I read. And also, might I say, plush, for those that don't know, is centered around cannibalistic furries, which made me think this is what my mom and dad thought I was watching when they saw me watching Invader Zim. I think this is what they thought the show was about.
That's fair.
That makes any sense. I guess, have you ever run into, which I say all that to say, I think you have very interesting concepts and hooks. I remember when Plastic came out, my local comic shop like pushed it really hard. They spoke really highly about it. They were just really into just how different it was. Have you ever come across any? Have you ever been met with any? I think resistance is too strong a word, but maybe any hesitance. Hesitance is better. Any hesitance with a publisher pitching a book or a story where they might be like, "Whoa, that's kind of out there."
Oh yeah, I run into that from time to time, and even with plastic. When Daniel and I were doing plastic, some of our friends would ask us what we were working on, and we'd tell them. And I would say probably about 50-50. Half of them would say, you're making a mistake. Like, this is going to end your career. Like, you'll never work in comics again. And so, yeah, and we were just like, well, we're doing it anyway because we love it, and we had support from Eric and Robert Kirkman, and they're like, hey, well, if we got their support, we'll keep moving. But at cons, I run into like, somebody will come up and just be offended by the concept.
Whoa.
I actually, there was one small show that a guy came up, and at this point, now I use blow up doll. When I first was pitching it, I always used sex doll. And he got so offended that I said sex doll out loud that he tried to have me removed from the show.
Whoa.
And so the great experience for me on this is it toughened up my skin.
Okay.
I had to learn, like, hey, listen, some people aren't going to get this and they're going to be offended just by the concept without even reading it. That's okay. You got to let them go. You just got to accept it. And sometimes we just kind of sit back and laugh at some of the reactions because, they're so offended. You're like, guys, it's just a blow up doll. Like, it's not,
it's just a funny book, brother. There's a sex doll in my funny book. I'm okay with that.
And then, so yeah, you do run into like, you got to kind of I've learned you can kind of read them when they walk up. Sure. Like, you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to give them the full pitch here because they might, Like,
Yeah.
lose it on me or whatever. But yeah, you run into people that are like, hey, this isn't for me, and I totally understand it. There's plenty of
Sure.
stuff that isn't for me.
Uh,
So
it sounds like you do a lot of traveling for conventions. You mentioned, having an affinity for Chris Claremont. Have you had a chance to meet Chris Claremont? And a little bonus question to that: Have you had any moments where you've just been like starstruck? Considering that you used to work in a comic shop, you're reading 30, 40 books, you're learning how to read and write from comic books. Have you been starstruck being a professional in the industry yourself?
oh yeah, when I met Chris Claremont the first time was at New York Comic Con, and it was at
Oh,
his table. And I did the same thing everybody says. I walked up and I said, "Oh, hey, Chris Claremont. I love your writing. I'm a huge fan of your work. Like it was impactful to my youth."
hmm
And you kind of tell he was like, "Yeah, I hear this all the time." Like he was super nice the whole time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's been several times where I've been like at a table or whatever. I think, um, I've always had anxiety issues. Didn't realize how bad they were. At one
Mhm.
point, I started having panic disorder.
Wow.
And that happened at a table. So I'm at a table with Cully Hamner, Jim Starlin, Walter and Louise Simonson.
Nice.
Yeah, and like I was so starstruck that like I started having a panic attack for the first
Oh,
time.
whoa. Yeah.
Yeah, so like
That
I'm
sucks.
sweating profusely, like I can't I didn't hear a word anybody said.
Yeah.
Like so it's like yeah, you run into when you run into some of the super big stars, like you're definitely like
Sure.
I'm still starstruck by several of them, and I just don't know what to say. Like what do you walk up to somebody like Walter Simon and say, "What do I have to say that probably he hasn't heard a million times?"
That's when you tell them that I was a fool and thought myself too brave to ask the Tide restaurant to give me a 10 on the heat meter. All right, that's why I'm sweating, and that's why I'm tongue tied, and that's why I can't talk. At least that's what I would say. I'd lie. All right, Doug, there was something interesting in your bio that I want to bring up. It says it goes on to list your accolades, long list there. But it says Doug can be found hiding out in Park City, Utah, where he spends his day creating madness, frolicking down the slopes with his lovely wife, and reveling cuddle time with the sweetest kitty in the world. Actually, that is not the one that it was another one. Oh, okay,
That's
okay,
the old
wait.
one. Yeah.
Okay, actually, okay, there's another one that said Doug currently resides in the mountains of Utah, where he conspires with his 3 rescue cats, reads way too many comics, and that's what I want to emphasize. Are you still? I mean, I guess is reading comics still an active thing for you? Do you still carve out time? I know for a lot of creators, once they enter the industry, they're just like too busy creating to enjoy actual comics. Do you still find time to, I guess, like hit up a shop or read the new titles or just read? Period.
Oh yeah, I try to read as much as possible.
Hmm.
I won't lie, like I'm always super busy. That's the thing about freelance is if you're not working, you're not making money.
Hmm.
So, that's me pretty much I work 6, 7 days a week. But I love it. So it's not it's not a horrible thing to have.
Sure.
But yeah, I still pick up comics. I have a stack that I'm way behind on, the typical 2-foot stack of
Jeff,
comics.
come
And I
on.
break, yeah,
If you don't have a 2 foot, at least a foot, a 12 foot, a 2 foot stack in a corner somewhere, are you really a comic book fan?
yeah.
That's how I like to say.
I just spent actually this week. I sat down and made myself catch up on all the I Hate Fairyland stuff.
Nice.
So yeah. I still try to like. I'm always looking for new stuff. I'm more indie now probably than I've ever been. There's some Marvel and DC books that have come out that I'll try, but the superhero stuff kind of like ran its course, I think, with me. I'm always
I'm
looking for the James Tynion, style of stories.
and I feel like, with so many great, just publishers
Mm-hmm.
topping out, it feels like every year, like last year, Ignition Press came on the scene and, like they've been putting out good stuff. Bad Idea, I felt like it had a resurgence like last year. It really is, it's a great time to like, be a fan of comic books. And that's why I think that Jim Lee, that's the only thing I had, that I'm thinking a lot about since reading that Jim Lee article this this week is that, it's like I think sometimes people forget that it's not just about superheroes. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
plenty of superhero stories in comic books, and there's some amazing ones. Obviously, Marvel and DC have published, the lion's share of them and whatnot, but it's not just superheroes. So when I look at what you guys are doing with 12 Gauge and focusing on crime and action, or Image, which it's like Image has every genre underneath the sun. It is hard to be like, as someone that grew up, I mean, I was a Marvel head growing up. My dad, that's the only comics he collected. I think you get to a certain point where either you're going to, like you're just looking for something new. And I think that's what I love about the comic book art form, is that it can tell the story of any genre out there. And it's really just dependent on the skill level, the skill set of the creators.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever seen a strong indie market like we do now. Like the writing, the art, everything else thrown in there is like, this is probably the best. And that's talking about, like, we've had some incredible stuff over the years, Cerebus and Bone and obviously Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and like the list goes on, but I don't think we've ever had quite this much great stuff coming out that's like professional quality, coloring, printing, everything. It just looks amazing.
Emphasis on that. Absolutely. Okay, Doug, I want to get into the signature segment when it comes to these interview episodes, and that is the Short Box Friends and Family segment. It's where I shut up for a little bit, and I let someone else ask the questions. In today's case, I've got 2 voicemails from you. The first one is from the owner of my local comic shop, Gotham City Limit. It's Ben Kingsbury. He's got a question for you, and I want to toss it to you.
Hey, Doug, Ben K from Gotham City Limit down here in sunny Jacksonville, Florida. Thanks so much for taking some time to answer a question. I've got a 2-parter for you. So I've always wondered about the material naming scheme you've used: plastic for the doll, vinyl for the records, plush for the fursuits. Is there a deeper reason behind choosing those specific textures, or was it more about how punchy and memorable single word material names sound for these wild books? Secondly, could we get another material book down the line, and what material would you choose next? I'll leave you here to answer. Thank you so much for everything you do for the comic community. We literally couldn't do it without you. And remember, Short Box Nation, we'll always take it to the limit. Peace.
Big shout out to Ben Kingsbury.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And dude, I feel the same way about retailers. Like, I couldn't do this without you guys. So like, it's a symbiotic relationship, and like, I support you 100% on everything you do. So the 2-parters. So the first one was like, was there deeper meaning behind them? I mean, obviously plastic it just started out, I knew Edwin was obsessed with plastic. So that's kind of like led me down that path to that title. The other 2 kind of came around because we wanted to make sure it wasn't what everybody was predicting would be the next one. So, you got a lot of people that were like, oh, you should do leather or pleather, or, and it's like,
oh, wow. Okay. They wanted you
like, no, we don't want to do any of those. Like, so then we did vinyl, and people were like, what? I wouldn't have never thought of that. I'm like, yeah, that's why we came up with it. Then it was like, okay, now we need to make another hard turn. We went, okay, well, nobody's going to guess we're doing something called plush. So like, there was never like really deep meaning behind it. It was more like us just being assholes about, like, we didn't want to, like, we didn't want people to be able to guess what we were doing next.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, Daniel and I are going to keep doing these style of books as long as people let us. And I don't know if we'll do like necessarily a straight up material one, just because of like what you and I talked earlier about, like, it's just tougher to sell it because people can't do it. But I don't know if I had another one. Like the other day I had, we were talking about it, and I don't know, something called asphalt, just kind of like rang. It was like, man, what does that mean? And what do you do with that?
Yeah.
Like, so, like, the next one like that is like, what does that mean? And what do you do with it?
Yeah, you're like slippers. Yeah. That's got a sex appeal to it. Okay, and then I think we might have answered the second one, considering that Narcos, like I said, is coming out in March, and that'll be the continuation of the materials universe. Narco being short for narcolepsy. So, I guess what was the departure from? Because I mean, narcolepsy isn't a material per se. I guess why the departure from plastic, vinyl, plush, like that wording?
Yeah, I mean, for this one, I mean, honestly, Kevin came to Daniel and I with the idea. And he was like, hey, we got this guy, with Narco. He kind of had the title in his head already. He's like, I want to call it Narco. I was like, yeah, that works with us. It's like, it's just another, we didn't want to get hung into like every title we had to have like a material name in it. I mean, I know that it kind of makes it fun over time, but at the same time, it becomes it doesn't feel fresh to me.
Yeah, I like that. And I was just about to say, I think that's a great word to describe the materials universe. And really, I think, your career in general is that you really do keep us on our toes. None of even though like they're all part of the shared universe. No, I feel like no, plastic's not the same as plush. It doesn't have the same feel and whatnot. Even though that you guys do manage to, like I said, have that through line to justify them being in the shared universe, but I think they're all different in a great way.
Thanks.
All right, and then I got one more voicemail from you for you, and I think you'll recognize the voice here. But let's play it and see if you catch it.
Hey Doug, it's Sean Edgar. I really want to know which serial killer you've written that you identify with the most.
Big shout outs to Sean. He is the senior marketing director of the new creator-owned comic publisher, Distillery, and responsible for hooking me and Doug up. So big shout out to Sean.
Yep. Thanks, Sean. Yeah, this is great to have a question from him. That's a tough one because I won't lie, like all the characters in my books honestly have a piece of me in them. So, like even, when I start thinking about like the difference between Edwin and Walter and say Edie from Plush, like they all have kind of like parts of me in them. But I still think, to this day, like Edwin will still be the one I relate to the most. He's that awkward, weird guy that like doesn't always necessarily know what the right thing to say is or says the wrong thing, not thinking it through. And then, I kind of based it on, I always feel like everybody has something in their life, that one thing that they love so much. Now, for most regular people, it's their spouse or their kids, stuff like that. But like, for me, it's my cats. And if somebody threatened my cat or kicked my cat wrong, I might skin them alive. I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
So that's where I really relate to Edwin in that fact. Like he loves Virginia with all his heart, and he's like, I'm going to protect her and take care of her no matter what. That no matter what path that leads me down. And so I kind of relate to that. Like, man, you mess with something I love, and like this could go sideways.
Cat people around the world are cheering you on. They feel the same way. I'm sure. Okay, Doug, we've talked a little bit about some of your collaborators. I normally play a name game where I say a couple of names and I ask what's the story that comes to mind, an anecdote, thoughts, what it was like working with them. I have a couple of the names here. We've spoken extensively about Daniel Hilliard. So we'll get back to him in case you want to think of like something else. But let's start with Brian Stelfreeze. We've mentioned him a couple times, but what comes to mind when you think of Brian Stelfreeze? Is there a story, a memory, whatever?
I mean, there's so many with Brian. I mean, he's just kind of like the first thing that comes to my mind when you mention him is like he's a storytelling genius. Yeah. And so like having a chance to sit down and talk with him on a regular basis about story and what works and what doesn't has always been a huge benefit to me and shaped how I write. With him, the story that always like the one that changed my life is I went into him one day and we were just having a talk in the office. And I said, I'm kind of getting, mad reviews on this story I'd written. And he goes, oh, that's the worst. And I go, that's the worst? And he goes, yeah, I'd rather people love it or hate it. He goes, anything in between is a failure to me.
Interesting.
And having somebody of Brian Stelfreeze caliber saying he'd rather people hate it than not like it. He's like, no, I want them to either love it or just hate it. And I'm like, oh, that's what I need to start aiming for, not trying to please the people in the middle, but finding the people that either love it or hate it. And so for me, it's always been an inspirational story and changed the way I thought about writing.
Which, I guess coming off of that advice, which comic or which series or project do you feel you accomplished that, where you got, met one of those extreme feelings?
Oh, I think right out of the gate was Plastic. Like, obviously we've been able to continue that since then with Vinyl and Plush and the rest of them. But when Plastic came out, like there were people, including my mom was like, you wrote about what?
I didn't even think to ask, what does your parents or wife think of? Yeah, I think of your work. I mean, because Doug, I'll be honest with you, your work. I mean, yeah, Daniel Hilliard has a way of drawing some very gory things, and I mean, he's working off a script you gave him. And I gotta say, your personality, very warm. You've got like a great smile, a great laugh. Is betraying everything that I thought going into this. Off the research I was doing. I guess what are some of the what do your family and friends think of your career?
I mean,
And the
it's
stories.
always interesting because, I got friends in different, as we all have, we have different lives, right? So like I play softball, so I have my softball friends and,
Oh,
like,
yeah,
I've got my comic book
compartmentalized friends. Yeah.
Yeah. And then my mom kind of pretends like none of this happens. She's like, oh, that's kind of cool. Or that's kind of neat that you're a writer, but she doesn't want to read anything I do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So she's
It's
just like, I don't want anything to do with any of this. Surprisingly, my wife loves it.
oh, that's cool.
My wife is very overly honest and blunt about it. And so like she'll read one of the comics we do. She waits until it gets collected in a trade, and then
Nice.
she gives me a grade.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
It's like you got a B+ on this one. And I'm like, B+, what did I do wrong? So like, those kind of things. She actually loves a lot of the stuff we do. She loves the quirky, murder mystery kind of stuff anyway.
I love that because it's like, look, comic nerds, I don't care what you say. Have you tried to impress my wife? Have you tried to get a C grade from my wife? Yeah.
She'll be like, this one wasn't as good as the last one, kind of thing. You're like,
Sure.
oh, okay.
Well, all right. I gotta ask, what's been the highest grade that she's given you? And if you don't mind sharing, what's like the lowest grade?
Both on Plastic Death and Dolls, which was a sequel, prequel kind of thing we did for Plastic. She gave me an A+.
Nice.
As well as she gave us an A+ on I Was a Fashion School Serial Killer. She loved it. I think the worst I got was on let's see. It would probably be when we did The Ride Burning Desire. That just wasn't the book for her. Like she's like, it was kind of a little slow moving, she's
like, get to the killing, Doug. Get to the murder and the crime and the action. It does. I will say
stories in it, but she didn't like the main story as much.
Yeah,
and I got a C+ on that one.
I love the honesty though. I feel like my wife is the same way. She could be. I value her input because she's also in podcasting. She comes from a journalistic background. She's a straight shooter. Yeah. So when I know something sucks, I'm gonna hear it. But I live for those like, you did really good on that. I'm like, yes, yes, it works. Okay. All right. So you gave me a story about Brian Stelfreeze. That was great. How about Andrew Robinson, who was the cover artist for Plastic? What comes to mind when you think Andrew Robinson?
I mean, Andrew's like, I love Andrew, and he's like, for me anyway, he's very guarded. So it's really tough to like get to know Andrew because he hides behind a pretty good shield. But once you get to know him, like he's like this giant gorilla guy. He's like massively strong. Like when you talk to him about what he does at the gym, and he's just like a block of a dude.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But like he's like at the same time, like he's just like really sweet, emotional, sensitive guy. And so like when you're talking to him about covers and stuff, and like he dives into like stuff that I never thought of, right? Like I'm like, oh well, you're talking about philosophies I didn't even think about when I was writing the story, but he picks up on it and turns it into a cover. And so what I just love is like you got like I said, like this giant guy that you would not expect to be like this really smart, really intuitive artist that can like really dive into something and go, hey, I got you.
I think you described them perfectly. I've had the opportunity to Andrew Robinson has been a guest at Collective Con for a couple of years now. And I've had 2 separate occasions, 2 different years and 2 different appearances to hang out with Andrew. I've interviewed him for the show. We've gone to dinner. And yes, he is, I think at face value, you're like, oh, this is kind of a physically intimidated guy. He keeps really quiet. But man, he is such a softie, man. He is a softie and extremely, and I think philosophical was a great word. He thinks, the way he thinks and, his perspective on things is great. Big shout out to Andrew Robinson. I'll probably share this episode with him. Okay. And then we've talked extensively about Daniel Hill, your co-creator, your friend, in all of this. So I will save that and ask for what comes to mind when I say Dave Stewart, which I think is such a big flex. One of the best colorists in the game has, graced, a couple of your series. What comes to mind when you think of Dave Stewart?
Yeah, and again, I mean, and this is just, lucky that you get to meet people like Dave and Daniel and Brian, and the super sweet guys, super nice. Maybe the most mellow person I've ever met. I don't know if I've ever seen him excited. Like I said, like when you were Dave, you kind of like start getting relax yourself, where you're like, no, I could take a nap. But Dave, like working with Dave is always, I mean, he's the consummate professional. Like he tells you exactly when the book, when he's going to have time to do things and when it's going to be there, and he never fails you. And when he's still super humble. Like he just turned in some covers for Narco today that he colored. He's like, oh, let me know if you like these or not. I could always do it again if you want me to. And I'm like, you're Dave Stewart. Whatever you color, I'm going to say yes to.
Exactly. Yeah.
So like he's just an amazing like guy, but like super mellow. Doesn't like, you don't see him in a lot of cons. He's not very, he doesn't like the social aspect of all that kind of stuff. He just kind of wants to color comics and enjoy them. And the fact that after all these years and all these Harveys and Eisners and everything else he's won, he still sends me an email going, hey, if you don't like it, I'll redo it. It's just,
that is a professional.
That speaks to his character.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's well said. Doug, I think, man, we're getting close to wrapping this up, but I want to ask you one last question. I feel like the theme for the past couple of interviews I've done so far this year has been about I've been trying to put a bigger emphasis on like the collaborative aspect of comics and like mentors that that help each other out. So I want to know, what's the best piece of advice that you ever got? Like, who comes to mind when you think about like mentors, whether that be directly or indirectly, that like really stand out when you think back on like your career and moments of helping you reach that next level?
Yeah, I mean, I just gave you my best mentor thing with Brian. That was probably the best piece of advice. Just flat out, at least it hit me hard. I was lucky enough to be like friends with Cully and Brian and Jason Pearson and Dave Johnson and Adam Hughes and Tony Harris and Joe Phillips and all the guys from Gaijin and Laura Martin and Carl Story and all those people over time. I would go and ask questions about like, what do you like? What do you not like? Those kind of things. And it's hard to put it into like one little story because it was all small nuggets.
Yeah.
They kind of built up over time. But being number one, as a creator, you kind of have to be that person that goes and asks those questions. But at the same time, all of those people taking time to answer them, and they all took their time and were thoughtful and gave me their honest opinions about like, hey, here's what I would do if I were you. So all of those people over time, but probably Brian I talked to the most, and we were next door to offices each other, and Cully Hamner too, and we would just talk about story. And it wasn't necessarily like me going in and going, hey, I need advice on how to write a better story. We just sit down and talk about what makes a good story.
Yeah.
And so those were the times that like over the years really had the biggest impact.
Well, I guess maybe this is an opportunity to return the favor, maybe to someone listening that's an aspiring writer. Do you have any advice for the aspiring comic writers out there? Like maybe advice that you wish you would have got a little earlier in your career?
And I think somebody probably told me this a couple of times and I didn't listen. So if you're hard-headed like me, try to take this one in. Stop trying to write a story that you think an editor is going to like. Start trying to write a story that you would want to read. Because if you don't want to read it, nobody else is going to want to read it. And that's how you find your voice. A lot of times you get writers and creators going, hey, how do I find my voice? And I'm like, you got to start doing what you think you would want to do, not start writing a Batman script because you think the Batman editor will like it. If it's, that's a really tough pill to swallow. And I've been told that's from some young creatives that's being selfish. But I think if you find any other writer, like I've heard James Gunn say the same thing, like write the story you would want to read, period.
Well said. Well, look, enough said. All right. So we're on a comic podcast. Doug, this was great. And I will say, and I think with that being said, ladies and gents, this is the Short Box Podcast, and we just finished talking to Doug Wagner about his brand new horror comic. It's called Narco. Issue 1 comes out March 4th. It's a 5-issue limited series. FOC, final order cutoff for issue 1 is February 9th, which should be the following Monday after this episode drops. So, look, you know how important it is to final order cutoff. You know how important it is to get these titles on your pull list. So, if you've become a instant fan of Doug Wagner like I have, because he is so friendly, so awesome, and he writes amazing comics, do yourselves a favor, do him a favor, put Narco on your pull list. Once again, issue 1 comes out March 4th. I'll have links to some previews you can check out in the show notes. I'll also have links to Doug's website and social media in the show notes so you can give him a follow so you can stay up to date with everything that he's got going on. Doug, this has literally been amazing. You've been fantastic. You've been super pleasant. Any parting words or shameless plugs before we wrap up?
Oh, no, but I just thank you for having me on the show, dude. I really appreciate you taking the time to have me here. So again, just like with Ben in the comic shops, I mean, we're all in a symbiotic relationship. None of us can do this without each other. I really appreciate you taking the time to have me on.
Hey, that means the world, and the door is open for another interview if you ever want it.